Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to Pakistan in Perspective, a special series examining the state of minority and human rights in Pakistan from a historical, legal, and philosophical perspective. In our last program, we discussed Pakistan's foundational approach to minority rights, and specifically Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah's vision for Pakistan. Today's program explores the question of religion in more detail, and specifically whether a state can define who is or is not a Muslim for purposes of the law. We'll be also discussing the particular discrimination against the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and how this discrimination is unique and distinct from other groups within Pakistan. Joining me in the studio again to discuss these matters are two very distinguished lawyers from Pakistan. We have Mr. Abid Hassan Minto, who is a senior lawyer and advocate before the Supreme Court of Pakistan and a constitutional law expert. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Minto. And we have Mr. Mujibur Rahman, who is also a senior lawyer and advocate before the Supreme Court of Pakistan and a scholar of Islamic Sharia law and related subjects. Both of our guests have also had many decades of experience litigating cases on behalf of minorities in Pakistan's courts. So I want to begin with you, Mr. Minto, on this question of state and religion. Is it the state's business to define religion?
Well, the first point is it for the state to deal with the question of religion at all? In my view, a state is determined by the constitutional structure that it provides for itself. And as I understand the history of development of society, I cannot conceive in a modern society a state which has a constitution which dabbles with religion. So therefore, there is no question of the state defining religion or prescribing the various kinds of religion and separating one religion from the other, or determining what kind of religion one must believe in, and so on and so forth. This is no business of the state, and this is what the founding father said.
And so we know that though that is the vision, the reality in the Constitution of Pakistan is in Article 2, the state is defined as an Islamic state. So is that contradictory with the foundational inception of Pakistan, the vision of Pakistan?
Yes, it's, I must immediately state that I am not a conformist. Even if the foundational prescription was like that, I would reject it in the modern times, and I will not accept that at all. But fortunately enough, the prescription itself was consistent with the modern times, when Mr. Jinnah said that religion will have nothing to do with the matters of the state. So therefore, this is quite contradictory. Whatever the present constitution provides as the foundation of the constitution and the direction which it gives to the constitution and the state itself is contradictory to the notion of the foundation conceived by Mr. Jinnah, number one, and secondly, it is contradictory to the concept of democracy itself. Because democracy is democracy. It's a democracy of all people. And in democracy, we know citizens as people, and we do not determine them from their faith.
So, Mr. Rahman, a contrary perspective may be that even though there is democratic impulses based on the foundation in Pakistan, that in reality it indeed is a religious state, that there are 187 million Muslims, and why shouldn't Pakistan be able to decide religious matters?
You see, when you look at the question from the philosophical or academic angle, Constitution by definition is an arrangement between the citizen and the state, and it defines the limitations of various organs of the state, how they are going to work. So, the foundational basis of a state is the constitution. And when you go to the notion of the state itself, go to the earlier period of Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau, the idea of social contract. The social contract, in the social contract between the state and the citizen reserves some right to himself and does not surrender those rights to state. Now, in the modern day world, we have in fact not a notional social contract, but a social contract in the form of a constitution. Constitution is a social contract, and the fundamental rights guaranteed by the constitution are in fact the rights reserved by the citizen for himself. So, and then the citizen does not surrender his relation with his creator to the state. The relationship with the state is different and the relationship with creator is different. You remember one of your American founding fathers, James Madison, how he talked about it. When you join a club or an association, you always join the club or association with a reservation to the general law of the land. So, he says when you join the state, you do so with a reservation towards your obligations towards your creator, the higher governor of the world. So, that is how he looked at it. So, I think the state has nothing to do with religion, whatever form of the state is. If you talk of the fact that Pakistan was envisioned as a state equidistant from all religions, let us avoid the word secular for the confusion that it raises between the certain minds. The state had to be equidistant from all religions. It had nothing to do with the religions. Qaeda-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah said that is that individual's affair, and the state has nothing to do with that. But by the structure which we have now, Pakistan state is heavily loaded towards being a religious state. In fact, I might say it has become a religious state. So, that is how it is today.
Mr. Minto, so how did that happen? How did religion get injected into statecraft in Pakistan?
Well, it all began with the 1949 resolution, which is called the Objectives Resolution. Prior to that, what we knew about Pakistan was what Mr. Jinnah had said, and that's all that we were imagining that Pakistan will be. But then, 1949 resolution, which is the Objectives Resolution, changed the course of history in Pakistan, and everybody forgot about what the President of the Constituent Assembly had made as a policy statement in the Constituent Assembly on the opening of that assembly. So, therefore, two opinions started coming up from that point of time. Those who were supporters of the Objectives Resolution and an Islamic state, and those who thought that this is not a democratic state conceived by the Objectives Resolution. So, that is the founding stone, I mean the 1949 resolution, and that was taken up as a preamble in the first constitution, and the first constitution said that it will be in Islamic, but unfortunately it did not say that state will have any religion, but it did create institutions of the state dealing with the matters of religion and the law making itself. So, therefore, the foundations of 1949 resolution were taken in by 1956 constitution, and from there onwards they were taken on by the 1973 constitution with additional provisions in the 1973 constitution, such as the one which said state will have a religion and state's religion is Islam. And then it was also decided what kind of Islam will prevail in the society, and each one of the sects will have its own interpretation, and there's all kinds of conflicts were put in the constitution then.
We had the opportunity to ask several leading scholars on Pakistan to share their impressions on this very important question of state and religion in Pakistan. Let's take a quick listen.
The state of human rights in Pakistan is very sad these days, because in a religious state, those people who do not follow the religion of the state, automatically they become second-rate citizens. which is negation of democracy.
Which a living body gifted, blessed by nature with intelligence and articulation. We say the faith of a citizen is defined by himself, nobody. No priest, no mullah, no ulma, alim, fazil can tell you or me what my faith is. And if you are referring to the constitutional amendment, the state has no business to define who is a Muslim, who is not a Muslim. There are limits to what the majority or the whole parliament can do. The whole parliament, in my humble opinion, cannot go beyond the basic formulation of Pakistan. If the basic formulation of Pakistan is that it is a federation, the parliament, whole parliament, cannot say it is not a federation. The whole parliament cannot say it is not a democratic country. The whole parliament cannot say that X is Muslim and Y is not a Muslim, beside the point. But from 1947, August 11, Pakistan meant a nation of equal citizens regardless of belief, creed, color, social position.
So we heard about a constitutional amendment in Pakistan, the Second Amendment, which defines who is or is not a Muslim for purposes of the law. And that has been a subject of considerable debate. Mr. Minto, would you shed light on this amendment and what it means?
Well, I think it's only darkness that I can shed through the
Well said.
this amendment, because the amendment itself is running counter to the objectives for which the state was created. The state was created for the purpose of becoming a modern democratic society. And this amendment is entering into an issue which is a controversial issue amongst the Muslims themselves. So therefore it is bringing the controversy between the Muslims into the constitution itself. Leaving aside the controversy between the Muslims themselves, how will the other minorities, the Hindus for example, or the Christians, think about this constitution where the Muslims cannot settle their own methods, way of life within the constitutional framework itself. So therefore it's all topsy-turvy. It's changed the course of history in our country, and we are now seeing actually what the contradiction actually has taken these strides to what level. Now the present day society in Pakistan is full of these contradictions, and there are fundamentalists who are holding gun in their hand and they are asking to implement their kind of a belief in the society itself. These people did not have the gun as such with them, but the majority sitting in the parliament took it into their hands, the authority to determine who is a Muslim and who is not a Muslim, and introduced this kind of a controversy in the constitution itself. And it is a sad day, it was a sad day in the history of Pakistan, where the liberals sitting in the parliament, they were in majority, and they capitulated and they sided with the orthodox and the conservative and the conventional Muslims who were bent upon taking the law into their hands by introducing this kind of an amendment.
Mr. Rahman, so what led to the passage of this amendment? Why was it passed in 1974?
By now it is well known, it is thoroughly documented now by political analysts and by other people. It was a political maneuver calculated to cater for the political ambitions of a particular party or a particular individual. There was nothing religious about it. Let me remind you, this defining of a Muslim, what is a Muslim state? If we go back to the 1953 disturbances, the Munir Inquiry Commission, Munir Kiani Inquiry Report, in that commission they examined each and every scholar of any recognition in Pakistan and asked them to define what an Islamic state is. Not two of them agreed on the definition of what a Muslim is, And the definition of an Islamic state which they gave, Munir was very incisive in his analysis. He probed them, what is an Islamic state, what will be the status of non-Muslims in Islamic state, what will be the character of an Islamic state, and they could not spell out what an Islamic state is going to be. So, the idea that it is going to be an Islamic state, nobody was very clear about it, and they could not give a definition, all the ulama put together. In 1974, again they did not give a definition of a Muslim. It was a strange method of defining a Muslim by defining who is not a Muslim.
What is, for the benefit of our audience, what is that definition that they did give?
Well, they targeted a particular community, anybody who does not believe in absolute and unqualified finality of the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and believes in any reformer or a prophet after him is not a Muslim for the purposes of law and constitution. I did not want to go into that definition, which brings which is intended only against a community. But the question is, I know it for certain that a pointed question was raised before the National Assembly. If you want to define a Muslim, is there a definition of a Muslim in the basic canonical sources of Islam? Is there a definition of Muslim in Quran and Sunnah? And if you can find no definition of a Muslim in Quran and Sunnah, then you are nobody to give a definition. And if there is a definition of a Muslim in Quran and Sunnah, you cannot deviate from that definition. So, in this case, there are their definitions, but that is a religious controversy. What I am saying is, state had no business, and in fact, the issue is so confused, as my friend said, you cannot throw any light, all darkness comes out of it. The issue actually always remained a controversial issue. Therefore, that issue should never have been gone into by any state organization or by any organization at a social level. It is an individual's matter. You may consider one party or the other, may consider each other Muslim or not Muslim, or good Muslims or bad Muslims. That has been going on. But to provide a definition in the Constitution is an absurdity. It is a negation of the constitutional arrangement. It is a negation of fundamental rights. It is a negation of all recognized standards or standards of human rights and human freedom.
Mr. Minto, some might contend that the idea of defining a Muslim in Pakistan's constitution is an abstract point, that it's a provision in a constitution and really doesn't have any real world implications. You, having been an advocate for minority rights and having argued cases before Pakistan's Supreme Court, are there real world implications of this definition?
Well, in fact, the implications are all political, you see, because otherwise, you see, what they are saying is a person who believes in this and does not believe in that is not a Muslim or is a Muslim. This is the determination of the faith of a person. What is this to do with the Constitution? And in the Constitution you say, for the purposes of Constitution and law, these people are non-Muslims. Only for the purposes of Constitution and the law. Although you are determining the faith of the people and you are separating one faith from the other and calling one the majority and the other the minority, and yet you are saying it is for the purposes of the Constitution and the law, because the Constitution says who shall be the president, who shall be elected to the National Assembly, who shall be the Prime Minister, who shall run the affairs of the state. So, for the purposes of the law and Constitution, you have to determine who is a Muslim for your purposes and who shall govern the society itself.
So you are in fact, as Mr. Saab says, you are in fact taking away all the political rights by defining, or you are reserving the political rights. So, as you said, has it impacted in real life? In real life, it is impacted in a manner that it has taken away certain political rights from a group. Then, apart from that, once you start dabbling into religion, then later on it opened the door for laws like Ordinance 20. Day-to-day practices of certain people were converted into crime. the social behavior was criminalized. The social etiquette became of a criminal offense.
So the
it did
constitutional amendment set the stage for future anti-minority legislation. It was
and
the origin for that legislation.
that is true. And then, as Mr. Minto has pointed out, it opened a floodgate of creating schisms, breaking the society and radicalizing the society. And now we see what is the result.
The matter of this definition itself, you will recall, only for the purpose of completing this chapter itself, you will recall that the original definition as given in the 1973 Constitution was again supplemented by Ziaul-Haq's dictatorship through another introduction in the Constitution, and saying by name, indicating who are the people who have to be hit by this amendment.
Right. And understanding specifically now the situation of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Pakistan, the question to you, Mr. Rahman, is do Ahmadi Muslims identify themselves as minorities?
As I said, Ahmadiyya Muslims perceive themselves to be Muslims. They have been labeled as not Muslims or whatever by I call it by fiction of law. And this fiction of law is not accepted, and it is not a reality. If you call a buffalo a horse or horse a buffalo, it does not change its basic character of a particular species. So Ahmadis continue to be whatever species they are. But the difficulty is, since they cannot identify themselves as Muslims under the mandate of law, and they would not identify themselves as non-Muslim on account of their conscience, so there being a conflict between their conscience and the law, they have to forego many rights. For example, they cannot enroll themselves as voters because either you take a particular, for example, passport. You apply for a passport, you declare your faith. There is such a, as you, in Americans they say catch-22. If you say I am a Muslim, you say I am a Muslim, which is according to my conscience, then you say you sign a declaration. And in that declaration you say everything against your faith. If you don't sign a declaration, you can't call yourself. So I mean, this is a very absurd kind of a situation where the Ahmadis have been placed. And the life of Ahmadis in Pakistan, I should say, I mean, it requires a lot of strength of conviction to live and withstand that kind of persecution.
Now, Mr. Minto, place the passage of this amendment in, within the history of Pakistan. It was 1974, and the events thereafter. Was this amendment a precursor for a new direction for the country?
Well, this amendment was then followed up. In fact, after the amendment introduced by Ziaul-Haq's regime, they then followed it up with the other laws that they made, and criminal law was changed, and there also specific provisions were added for against the Ahmadiyyas themselves. So therefore, it has changed the course of history, although some effort has been now made during the last regime. I mean, there is the last dictatorship itself, the Pervez Musharraf dictatorship, and then the present regime to retrieve it to some extent, but it has not been fully retrieved and put in the original position where we want it to be placed as a democratic society. It continues to infest the constitution in the same fashion, and the whole question is, it's not no longer merely a constitutional issue. It's no longer merely a matter between two believers of the of one faith and believer of another faith. It's a question which has now manifested itself in the total mindset of the people. You see, because if you read all these things in your courses of studies and your Pakistan's history and the development of the society, and the universities and the colleges and the academic institutions cater for all this kind of material, and that is how the people are taught. So therefore, a mindset is created, which mindset is quite obvious now in our society.
So, Mr. Rahman, going back to the situation and plight of the Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan, shed some light on this notion of self-identification. We know from international law the notion of freedom of conscience, to have the absolute freedom to think freely and believe freely. How is that right impacted by a state defining who you are rather than allowing yourself to define who you are?
You see, as a practicing lawyer and having seen and read some of the judgments of the various jurisdictions about the human rights and the rights of the parliament to take away or abridge the human rights, there are numerous judgments in our neighboring country and in the United States and other countries where they say that the parliament cannot abridge the right of fundamental rights, not at all. But now here a definition has been provided. Article 20 has not been touched, which is supposed to be the guarantee of religious freedom. That has not been touched. Only a definition has been provided. But when by definition you provide an identity to a person, you are by force of law taking away his very right to profess. Right to profess is the first step of the freedom of faith. If you cannot profess to be a Muslim, the question of practice comes later.
And to be clear, the right to profess is explicitly mentioned in Article 20 of the Constitution.
So you have in fact taken away the right to profess. That is, by international standards, that is an unconstitutional, that is illegal step that which the Pakistan state or the parliament has taken. That in an ideal situation, that needs to be struck down. And that impacts on the very profession of faith, and when the profession of faith is affected, then the practice naturally, and that is how the day-to-day practices of Ahmadis have become a crime.
That's all the time we had for today's program. I'd like to thank our panelists again for joining us. Our special series, Pakistan in Perspective, continues. Join us for next week's program, in which we will take a closer look at the case of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and specifically the laws that have been promulgated to target and criminalize their activities. So stay tuned for that program. Thank you very much.